Hi everyone, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are. I'm your host, Dr. Haider Shah. On behalf of Calvas, I would like to welcome all of you to this webinar. Thank you very much for joining us. Today we have another very interesting topic, and I'm really honored to welcome and introduce our distinguished guest speaker who is going to talk about demystifying qualitative research from A to Z with grounded theory. Qualitative research can sometimes feel overwhelming, but today we will break it down step by step with a focus on the grounded theory as a powerful method for generating insights. So, we will explore the practical strategies from data collection to analysis that will help you confidently approach the qualitative research. Really, very interesting topic, and I'm sure you will learn a lot from this session as we have a guest who has a wonderful understanding and a powerful grip on the topic. So stay tuned because an amazing stuff are coming ahead in this session. So before we start, I would like to thank Kalwas for arranging such enlightenment sessions for their support and providing us such a wonderful platform. The aim of Kalwas is to give you the opportunity to connect and interact with world-renowned speakers, academic leaders, teachers, authors, researchers, experts, professionals, and businessmen to learn from their experiences, recommendation, and suggestion, which will create an impact and will enable you to learn and develop yourself in order to grow and transform individually as well as to contribute to the world in a positive way. As our slogan is come, learn, and share knowledge. So today we have amazing person as guest who has a vast and wonderful experience, an internationally known and recognized personality. He is a great human being, and we always see him while contributing to the world and field in different ways. So let me introduce him formally. He is currently working as an assistant professor and director of Quality Enhancement Cell and ORIC, University of Swat, Pakistan. He received his PhD in Management Sciences with major in the entrepreneurship and value creation from Kurtaba University of Science and Information Technology, Peshawar, Pakistan. 2 years of master degree MS in Innovation and Business Creation in the Strategic Entrepreneurship from Sweden, as well as the Master of Business Administration MBA majoring in the Marketing, secured highest grades with the distinction from IM Sciences top institution in the Peshawar. Moreover, regarding his administrative responsibility, currently he is the Director of Quality Enhancement Cell, the University of Swat, and Director of ORIC, Office of Research, Innovation and Commercialization, Pro Bono Country Director, KS Global Research based in Malaysia and United Kingdom, a focal person to HEC for establishment of Women Sub-Campus, Program Coordinator, Center for Management and Commerce, University of Swat, and numerous. In addition to that, he has numerous research articles and book chapters in renowned journals. He has also participated in multiple international conferences and national. Along with that, he also provides training, workshops, and consultancy works in his area of expertise. Last but not the least, he's a wonderful speaker, author, teacher, researcher, professional, and above everything, a great human being. So please help me in welcoming our guest, Dr. Muhammad Tariq. Welcome to the Calvas platform, and thank you very much for joining us, sir.
Thank you, Dr. Haider Shah, for having me today and giving me the opportunity to speak before an international audience. I'm glad and I'm happy to join you in this scholarly endeavor. And I hope that this will be a mutually learning experience where we will learn from those who are interested in knowledge seeking as well as rub shoulders, hopefully, against future researchers so that we can collaborate in future as well. I am especially in particular thankful to the CEO of Calvas as well as to you personally for giving me this opportunity to speak on a very interesting topic, a topic that I personally struggled with at one point in time. And afterwards, through years of hard work, perseverance, and some guidance from peers and some grilling from peer reviewers, we have hopefully cracked it. And here is a chance for all those knowledge seekers, all those, I would say, grounded theorists to learn it by way of listening to this, I would say, session. So to begin with, I would request Dr. Shah to share the slides so that I may give an overview. Today's topic of interest is demystifying qualitative research from A to Z with grounded theory. Obviously, my name is Dr. Muhammad Tariq Yusuf Zai, and I have listed my email, that is muhammadtariq@swat.edu.pk. The reason for listing my email over here is to allow you a touch point to contact me if you are interested in acquisition of related material such as recommended readings, as well as some of the seminal and germinal authors, as well as the books which are available with me. So here is a chance to touch base with me, and I also look forward to you people giving me your feedback. So the topic is grounded theory. Now, obviously, grounded theory is a very fancy terminology, but some of the others, think that grounded theory or qualitative research is very difficult. Unfortunately, it is due to the lack of understanding and conceptual clarity that some people think of it as very cumbersome or very difficult. So, in my view, it is to the contrary, very easy and systematic process. And if you understand the process, you plan your study accordingly, and you go with an intent, I'm sure that you can make it, and you can make it to the top tier journals. And I hope this session will be fruitful for you. So to move ahead, I have in the first slide I have listed the some takeaways of the session to understand the importance of using standards of reporting qualitative research. Now, majority of the times when students submit their thesis, dissertation, proposal, or even if they submit to a qualitative or for that matter, an interdisciplinary journal, some of the reviewers give strange comments like you have carried out an inductive qualitative study, and they would give you the comments that you have not included descriptive statistics, or you have not included numbers in it, so to speak. To counter these kind of, I would say, reviewers, as well as to understand the process in totality, we suggest that qualitative researchers, especially those who intend to use grounded theory methodology, should adhere to the standards of reporting of qualitative research, that is the SRQR. Basically, there are 21 standards. So if you adhere to those standards and you give the proper citation, so I'm sure that nobody can dismiss your research by just saying that your study is not scientific, or it is not rigorous, or it is just accumulation of ideas or words. So standards is something which is universally accepted, and hence majority of the, I would say 30% of the time, would be allocated towards discussion of these standards. Then there is this second point, epistemological operation of inductive qualitative researchers. There is one author by the name of Karl Proper. Some people call him Karl Pope Proper, but it is not called Proper, it is called Popper. He came up with a book where he literally dismissed the inductive qualitative research, and he said that there is no logic in it, while he was at the same time referring to it as inductive logic. So his statements were contradictory. There is this falsification of existing theories concept for giving new theories. So unfortunately or fortunately, that book became very popular, and now the dominant class of people who conduct research, they belong to the followers of that book written by Karl Popper, which in totally dismisses the inductive qualitative studies. So right now we are in minority, and this session is one of the efforts, or I would say, to create a critical mass of inductive qualitative researchers, so that we may come out one day from a minority position to a majority position. In my university, 99% of the studies conducted are from a causal or positivist perspective. So when my students present their synopsis in the advanced studies and research board, everybody is stunned, or everybody is just mum silent, and they think, oh my god, what is going on? There is, this is something new for us, and we don't understand. And so to speak, there is some kind of epistemological oppression. But the good news is there are people and there are researchers who are continuously, producing inductive qualitative studies. In fact, the process of generating new theory mainly comes from inductive qualitative studies, because this is the process of theory development. Otherwise, theory testing is there, but theory development through inductive qualitative strategies is more beneficial. And this point has already been asserted by authors of the Great Minds in Management book. That is another book, available with me. And though it is a bit hard read, but I can always, recommend it. Maybe it takes you years, but one day if you start something, you will be able to finish it. So to move ahead, then we have to understand practical issues in conducting of research. Now, at times, let's say some of the researchers, you may have seen that there are people who come up with a number of publication every year. There are certain serial authors who publish more than 100 papers in a year. So if you, for example, intend to work or collaborate with such authors, the likelihood of the journal asking you for an IRB is very high. So what is an IRB? IRB is Institutional Review Board permission to conduct a research study. So some of the time students have difficulty like what is an IRB. So the the acceptance of the research proposal from your advanced studies and research board is a substitute for IRB. This gives this kind of certificate gives the assurance to the journal that a genuine study has been conducted. Likewise, if there is a project that is under the supervision of a professor, and if you claim that my study or my paper is part of that project, it gives assurance, confidence that to the reviewers as well as to the journal publisher that your study is genuine, it is worthy of publication. Then we have interview guide, developing in qualitative researches. We, instead of using the term questionnaire, we use the term interview guide. So developing an interview guide is a recursive process. Majority of the time we use pilot phasing. In the initial 3-4 interviews, we try to refine our interview guide. The development of interview guide, as I have told you, is a recursive process, and it involves, various things. Like, for example, some of the time you need to establish rapport with your participants. Again, I use the word participant because in qualitative studies we don't most of the time use the word respondent. Rather, we use the word participants. So you try to break the ice, and to break the ice you talk into some kind of discussion so that you develop some rapport, some some connection with the participant, and then you are able to gradually get their consent. So now, in regards to consent, it is another tricky area. For example, if you ask somebody who's rather not so very literate, so they will be very reluctant to sign something, especially when they don't understand English language for that matter. So consent can be implied as well as explicit. Some of like if a person gives you his or her phone number or a national identity card number, this is the form of an implicit consent. So if you have consent form and you are following the research ethics, ethics in a sense that you try to inform the audience that your interview will be recorded or transcribed, and it will be part of the of a research project. So it is crucial that you inform the participants about the nature of the study, the process of recording or transcription, and whether or not they will be having an opportunity to review their transcription. But here is a catch. Some of the time, for example, if you tell somebody that this interview is going to be recorded, they start using parliamentarian language. They become very reserved. So, but if you don't tell them that this video or this interview has been recorded, they become very fluent, and they're very open. But as a matter of adherence to the ethical standards, we need to inform the person that the interview will be recorded. In management, you may have heard about the Hawthorne effect. Hawthorne effect is a phenomenon where if somebody comes to know that they are being observed, so their productivity increases irrespective of the working condition. So likewise, if they become, aware that a particular interview will be recorded, they become a bit defensive, and the information is not that rich, but still we have to live with it. And this is one of the, I would say, potential limitations, especially in countries like Pakistan, India, and those in the global south. Then I will present a generic methodology section of grounded theory, dissertation, or thesis. So that generic means journal. You can use it in different variations, but I would like to just give you a roadmap which you can follow and where you can tick the uh, important steps. Four steps are involved, and we will be discussing that towards the end of the lecture. Types of grounded theory, obviously two version. One is abridged and the other is systematic. Glasser and Strauss have come up with two versions. The grounded theory has its origin in sociology, as all of you may know, and there are three coding stages, that is open, axial, and selective coding stages. Now, the interesting thing about grounded theory is that you create codes. Now, what is coding? Coding is a process of conceptual abstraction. Now, concept is something which people struggle with. Concept simply means how you classify the world in your mind. If you are able to classify something in your mind and then recall it, you say, my concept is clear. If you are unable to classify something in your mind, and for example, some of the students, when I ask them, do you know the difference between fruits and vegetables, and they tell me yes. So okay, I tell them, allocate a tomato to fruit and vegetable, or an onion to a fruit and vegetable, and they immediately say vegetable. And then I tell them, what is a banana? They tell me that a banana is a fruit. Now, then all of a sudden I tell them, now what is a chiku? Some of them say that we don't know. Maybe it is a vegetable, or maybe it is a fruit. So for that matter, I tell them, now in regards to this chiku or some other unknown thing, what is happening on your concept is not clear, because you are unable to classify the chiku in your mind in the categories that are already created. For example, the vegetable category and the fruit category. And once I show them the chiku and make them eat chiku, they say, oh my God, this is a fruit. This, I now, my concept is clear. So conceptual abstraction process is what we call coding. So there are three phases in coding, and the grounded theory is very interesting in a sense that it involves uh, constant comparison method. Like you collect data, but at the same time you analyze data. In the initial axial coding, the sampling is purposive. Sorry, in the initial open coding, the sampling is purposive. In the axial coding, the sampling is selective, whereas in the um, final selective coding, it is deliberate sampling. So you have different sampling strategies, and this is where the qualitative studies, like thematic studies, and the difference between qualitative study and thematic study is that in thematic study, we have one level of analysis, whereas in grounded theory, we have three levels of analysis as well as constant comparison method. The two books, Criswell and Poth, 2016, as well as Criswell and Criswell, these two books are available with me, and I can share with you as well as through our host, Dr. Haider Shah in Calves. So if anybody is interested, one of the important thing is, finding out the relevant book and reading it in totality. In the global south or in non-native speaking countries, majority of the students struggle with reading voluminous volumes of books. So what I have done is that I have created an abridged version of this second book by Criswell. So I converted the 600 pages into 60 pages of abridged version of this book. So if anybody is interested, I can always share with him or her. So this is the kind of gift at the outset from me. Moving ahead, the standards for qualitative research includes 21 standards, as I have already told you at the beginning. So I will quickly go through because majority of you are well aware of these things, and our main focus will be on grounded theory. Some of the students, they come and tell us, you know, sir, give me a title. What is the title of my study? So it is a bit annoying for professors that how come I give you a title of the study? Instead, I can give you a topic, a broader area which you can later on explore. So there has to be a title that is concise description of the nature and topic of the study, identifying the study as a qualitative or indicating the approach, that is ethnography, grounded theory, or data collection methods, that is interview, focus group. Basically, 5 strategies of inquiry are important in terms of inductive qualitative studies, that is narratives, ethnography, phenomenology, grounded theory, case study. So these are all included in the 5 strategies of inquiry book by Criswell and Poth. An abstract obviously written at the conclusion or at the end of your thesis or dissertation. You have to have it. Introduction, majority of the students struggle with the problem formulation. The problematization is very important, but it is crucial that in the problem you come up with certain things like you give the thesis statement, you give what is the problem, what is missing, and then you come up with a solution. So it's just simply saying that there is a gap and we want to fill it. No, that's not sufficient. Moving ahead, purpose or research questions. In qualitative research, we have research questions, whereas in quantitative, we have hypotheses. So the purpose of the study and specific objectives are questions. There are specific methods of conversion of research questions into hypotheses and objectives, which are already shared by Calvas during some of their, I would say, social media posts. So you can always learn it from there. In the methods section, what you do is in the qualitative approach and research paradigm, you list it. You list your strategy of inquiry as to whether you have used grounded theory, ethnography, case study, phenomenology, narrative research, or for that matter, if you have carried out a simple thematic analysis and guiding theory if appropriate. Some of the times you use a theoretical lens, like we, for example, when if studying waste management, you can use a theoretical lens of social construction of stigma, because those people who carry out the process of waste collection, they are clean in itself, but their work is sometimes considered rather not so clean, and their work is stigmatized. So you use sometimes a certain theory like the social construction of stigma to see the process of waste collection are those who involved in it. Identifying the research paradigm, you obviously, in most of the researches, you don't explicitly state that I'm following positivism, or I'm following, for that matter, transformative research, but between the lines it becomes evident. For example, if you are using you are testing a particular theory, it becomes obvious that you are following positivism. Or if you are using social constructivist, you are into the process of meaning making, so it becomes evident that you are into an interpretive process. Just to take this opportunity, let me let me make it very clear that grounded theory, and for that matter qualitative research, is more of an art. Sometimes you need to art as well as a science. You need to come up with concepts, as I have already told you, that it is the conceptualization of it is the classification of the world in your mind. Then moving ahead, S6 is researcher characteristics and reflexivity. Obviously here you talk about your own positionality in terms of your prior research work or the research group where you are working, and the context of the study needs to be described. In the science oriented journals, we call the context as the in the materials and methods section. Instead of methodology, they call it the materials and methods section. So over there, they use the jurisdiction of the study, where here you may state the context of the study, so as to allow the readers an understanding of how things are unfolding, so that they may relate to it. And with regards to sampling strategy, you state what was the process of determining the sampling frame, how people were contacted, how you screened them, and what types of what is the rationale for determination of certain number of participants. For example, some people may say at the start that I will conduct 30 interviews. Now, conducting 30 interviews is a cumbersome process. Let's say if your interview is 1 hour long, let's say if somebody is recording me, and if we may consider it as an interview, so my 1 hour of talk would be like 3 to 5 hours of transcription. If you transcribe it and you then analyze 30 interviews of such volume, perhaps it will take around 6 months to just carry out the transcription process and data collection process. Not to forget that majority of the time interviews are missed. Some people would commit to interviewing, but later on they would they don't turn up, or they just simply shy away. So at the inception, you cannot say that I will conduct 10, 20, 30, but rather the point of theoretical saturation, or the point of saturation at which new insights cease to emerge from the conduct of further interviews, determines the number of interviews. So there is slight variations in terms of Criswell 2014. They say that 20 to 30 interviews are adequate, whereas Chermes 2006 says that up to 25. Whereas Corbin and Strauss emphasizes the point of theoretical saturation, which I have already described. And then Brinkman and Paul advocates for 12 plus minus 1 interviews, 12 plus minus 10 interviews, and 20 to 30 interviews. Some authors, even suggest up to 50 interviews, but that would depend upon the number, the amount of resources in terms of time and finances, as well as your own stamina. So if this is a justification, majority of the time in journals they come up with this objection that how have you determined your sampling procedure or the number of participants. So this slide is a good answer to such reviewers as well as professors who will be studying who will be reviewing your thesis or dissertation. With regards to ethics, naivety from ethical standards it's in itself is naive. We need to ensure that and respect the participant privacy. Like one of the strategy is to allocate pseudonyms, which we also called alias names, to participants so that their identity is not concealed. And we need to make sure that the participants of the study are not harmed in a particular research study. For example, one of our friend conducted an ethnographic study, and that was more of a, in an area which was very complex and which was conflict ridden. So only 2 interviews were taken, and those 2 interviews in an ethnographic study were adequate and were published later on by a good, reasonable journal. So it all depends upon the quality of data. And sometimes, the quality of data can be, very hard to acquire. Another friend of mine conducted a study on the practices of personnel involved in bomb disposing in Pakistan. So that is a very dangerous phenomena, and the people who conduct these things they literally are without safety gears, and it's very dangerous. So in such instances, it can be very difficult, but we need to ensure that informed consent, institutional review board, related permissions, as well as proper documentation, as well as peer briefing, as well as the interviewees or participants should have been given a chance to review their interviews. If these practices are included, so this ensures that the trustworthiness is there. Trustworthiness in qualitative research is equivalent of what we call validity in quantitative researches, for that matter. So to speak, we need to have more rigor, we need to have more ethics in your study. Then moving ahead, data collection methods. Obviously, interview is the main data collection instrument. Or semi interviews can be semi-structured, structured. Majority of the time, we do the semi-structured process. And the semi-structured interview would comprise of an interview guide that is recursively refined, especially during the pilot phase of the study. And you try to establish rapport with your participants. You open with, some type of mini tour questions, grand tour questions, taxonomic questions, and then you gradually dive deep into the process. You try to facilitate the author by giving him some prompts or cues, so that not the other the participants, so that he or she may feel comfortable and give you elaborate answers. Then, at the end, you may ask the others about other people who are interested in giving interviews. With regards to data collection instruments, we in qualitative research we call it interview guide, whereas in quantitative studies we call it questionnaire. Still, some people who use mixed methods, they also refer to it as questionnaire. But I would say for a grounded theorist, it is a bit naive to call it questionnaire. We should better call it interview guide. Now, interview can be recorded and transcribed verbatim as well as non-verbatim. Yeah, so in non-verbatim, you basically do what is that you save some time, but it's perfectly fine as long as you have the documented form of it, because research is a process of constant accountability. You need to have the evidence. Then you state that the units of the study, the participants, why have you chosen? One of the important area is that you need to make sure that your participants are, their ratio is equal. One should not be gender biased in research, but again, it's very challenging in Pakistan, especially in certain provinces such as Khyber Pakhtunkhwa, or in Balochistan, or in other cultures where the access to women is restricted because of the local charters and cultures, as well as religious belief. But again, when there is a will, there is a way. So you make efforts that your research should be as representative as possible. Uh, Moving ahead, data processing. Obviously, methods for data processing prior to and during analysis, including transcription, data entry, data management, security verification, data integrity, data coding, anonymization, de-identification. I have already deliberated upon them. For anonymization, I used the pseudonym alias name, and then data integrity. Even if you keep a diary or if you undertake memoing, the ink that you use can be later used to verify that as evidence that you conducted a thorough research. So evidence maintenance in qualitative research is crucially important, and data management is even more important, and transcribing your research in a proper manner. One suggestion is that once you conduct interviews, you make sure that the area is noise free. With regards to data analysis, we have various methods. Uh, Walker et al. Has developed one qualitative data analysis thematic approach. Then we have Miles and Huberman, 1984, a methodology of data collection, data reduction, data display, and conclusions and findings. And with regards to different qualitative strategies of inquiry, such as grounded theory, we have the open, axial, and selective coding strategies. So we will be later on moving towards these techniques to enhance trustworthiness. Trustworthiness would involve peer debriefing or member checks, or even recording the paralanguage of the respondents. Sometimes if somebody is nodding his or her head, somebody is laughing, frowning, leaning back, scratching his or her head, and if you record them and document them, it speaks volumes of what things do mean. Then synthesis and interpretation. Obviously, main findings, interpretations, inferences, and themes might include development of a theory or model or integration with in grounded theory studies. We come up with a logic diagram, storyline, or a framework, which act as a stepping stone towards development of a substantive level theory, which can be in the form of proposition, recommendations, or as I have said, a framework. Then you try to make links to empirical data. This process is generally carried out in the discussion section. I would suggest that in grounded theory, for example, you have carried out the analysis into the open, axial, and selective coding strategies question by question. So I would suggest that you don't give the links to empirical data over there in that section. Instead, you give the links to empirical data in discussion as to referring to prior work, implication, transferability, and contributions of the study. Now, listing good contributions of the study would require some time. You need to establish, the novelty of your study in a very articulate manner. One of the thing apart from this that majority of our authors struggle is that they don't follow the paragraphing rules. Some paragraphs are very short, others are very long. You need to have some method behind your paragraphing. You need to have a topic sentence, you need to have signpost, you need to have a point of departure and concluding sentence for every paragraph, and then connectors are obviously there. So then moving ahead, you need to specify the limitations as well as the delimitations, because no study is complete, and if there are any completing conflicts of interest, you state them, and then funding or will give reassurance to the reviewers and the publishers of your data or your publication that original study has been carried out. So these are the 21 standards, and if they are conducted in a proper manner, this will support. This will make sure that nobody can dismiss your study. Now, moving ahead, Dr. Haider Ali Shah, I am almost done with 70% of the presentation. Am I going okay, or there are some time restrictions?
No, it's fine, and you are doing wonderful. And I don't want to interrupt you. Please carry on, and we want to listen more. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Shah. And now, moving ahead, I have listed a generic roadmap of methodology chapter for grounded theory studies, in particular. So basically, I have designed the methodology roadmap in 4 stages. Stage one comprises of initial literature review, where you carry out or you read the seminal and germinal authors in the field, as well as try to understand what is happening on the current debates. You come up with research questions. For research questions, I would suggest a book as well as a paper uh, by by Mr. White or Dr. White, I would say, Who is Afraid of Research Questions. So you frame initial research question, then you conduct pilot test or pre-test interviews so that you also come to know what I have studied and what is happening on in the field, so that you may refine your research questions in a manner that it makes sense. Remember that research questions should not include the words such as or and try to avoid research questions where research question number 2 is contingent upon the outcome of research question 1. Let's say some of the researchers say that whether or not this thing is happening on in a research question 1. So if yes, so research question 2. So let's say if the answer to research question 1 comes out to be no, so then your study would not be able to proceed to research question 2 or research question 3. So contingent research questions should be avoided in the best possible manner. Now, this is an iterative process, recursive process, and I would say you should refine your proposal as many times as possible. It is like laying a sound foundation. Once you lay a sound foundation, subsequent work can be very easy and fast. Now, moving ahead in the second stage, you determine your own, ontology view of reality, your epistemology, how to get to that reality that you are interested in, and your axiology, your values, as well as, the philosophical worldviews. For example, whether you would go for, the scientific method of positivism or social constructivism of interpretivism, that is what we call meaning making, or pragmatism, that is, what works at a time. You look into these things. Some of the times, these are implicitly stated. These words are not explicitly stated. One of the biggest problem in our MPhil and PhD nowadays is that the philosophy dimension has, disappeared from Master of Philosophy and, Doctor of Philosophy studies. So we need to study them. Unless and until we study them and understand them, will not be, proper scholars. It's crucially important. Now you design, you'd come up with the research design. It's simple. You design it. Design is the new combination of existing resources. So the toolbox that you have, the available resources you come up with, for example, the data collection, the sampling selection. As I have told you, in grounded theory, the sampling is of three types in across the three stages of open XCL and selective coding. So you also state your sampling frame, whether you will go for semi-structured interviews, and you will develop an interview guide through a recursive process of refinement, and whether you will collect cross-sectional, mostly cross-sectional data is collected for thesis, and longitudinal data is preferred by certain journals, but it is time consuming as well as would require a number of resources. So I would suggest most of the time cross-sectional data. Then, with regards to the stage four, that is the data analysis. Let's say you have chosen grounded theory. Now, grounded theory is used most of the time when there is lack of a priori theories to explain your study. So, when something is happening for which there are no existing theory, you use grounded theory because it gives you a good cover. Now, in grounded theory, we collect data, and we say that it is a constant comparison process where you collect data as well as analyze the data simultaneously. And at the end of the day, you develop a coding paradigm. For coding, I would suggest using or studying the book published by Sage by Saldana. So you can have you can get some help from there. Remember that qualitative research would involve making very high quality diagrams or creating high quality tables. For example, at one point in time you may be asked to develop codes and give a professional look to those codes. So for that, good tabulation would be required, or sometimes a diagram. You need to establish a good diagram. For that, you need to develop your skills. And then, end of the day, what would happen is that some proposition raw theory would be developed, and conclusion and recommendation would follow. There is something like a roadmap that you can use for your methodology section if you're using grounded theory at bachelor, master's, and PhD level. So I just wanted to give a chance to those people who plan to this is my own conceptualization of mind. You can use your own conceptualization of mind. Now, this is something majority of the students, they struggle with. Now, the stages of coding stages. Now, as I have already stated, that coding over here refers to chunking or abstract conceptualization into various codes. In the grounded theory, let's say you have 10 questions in your interview guide. So you will carry out three types of analysis. One is open coding, axial coding, and selective coding. The open coding analysis will inform axial coding analysis. Like in the open coding, the sampling would be purposive. In the axial, it would be selective. And in the selective coding, it will be deliberate. You look to the nature of the data, the type of responses that you are receiving, and then you accordingly decide as to what kind of respondents would I be needing to have, the desired data. So we sometimes call this theoretical sampling, and this is one of the important features of qualitative researches, especially the grounded theory. In the first process, in open coding, you will get a lot of data, and you carry out line by line analysis or constant comparison. Memoing is, so you write down, you keep a journal or diary, line by line analysis, or you transcribe it, you maintain, then you come up with categories. Categories, our goal is to, densification of categories. Densification of categories would result in the emergence of a core category, as we can see in the third. First, we do what? We collect the data from interviews, then we categorize them into themes or variables, and then, emerging core categories. Now, this core category will be further refined to, through densification of categories. Like in Excel coding, we continue with the constant comparison, memoing, developing higher order categories through identifying and establishing relationship among variables. And in the first two, we are trying to filter out the data. In the third one, we try to integrate the data. Integration simply means, synthesizing things here. Otherwise, integration would mean, attainment of unity out of diversity. So you try to, come up with a holistic description of a social process that explains the phenomena of interest. It is important that some of the time, while you are stating these things in words, you need to come up with evidence. Sometimes reviewers ask you for excerpts, or words in verbatim that are indented and enclosed in inverted commas, so as to show, the evidence in the words of participant. This is something that I have countered during thesis writing, as well as during review processes of various publications. So you need to include, a few excerpts, I would say, or extracts from the respondents' responses, or from the participant responses. So these are the steps that are involved. For further clarification, I would suggest reading my paper that was published in the Journal of Cleaner Production Sustainability of Waste Picker Sustainability for Cleaner Production, so 2020. So I would suggest, reading my publications in 2020, 2021, 22 for greater elaboration. In particular, the Journal of Cleaner Production can serve as a stepping stone for becoming a grounded theorist, because scarcity of the time dictate over here that I keep it simple and straightforward. But here is a chance, you follow these steps, you do the documentation, you don't conceal facts, you put it for examination, for display, you stay honest, you act as a researcher, you act and you persevere as a researcher, and hopefully things would emerge. The data, the theory. Remember that the theory that develops from grounded theory is not tested theory or mid-range theory or grand theory. Rather, it is substantive level theory, which will be later on tested, which will be refined. And developing a theory basically requires a lifelong time. But some of the theories that we develop actually act as a stepping stone for development of further theories. Remember that, in different cultures, different theories are developed. Like the Osam razor concept states that a theory should be very parsimonious, simple. It should only include as many as concepts or variables which are necessary. But some cultures would require complex theories. So depending, but Osam razor concept says that only few variables, if explain a particular phenomena of interest, would be better. Now, here is a tricky thing. This is a logic diagram. Forgive me for, some text overlap. It was okay in the original PowerPoint, but over here it is a bit showing a bit congested. Now, one of the biggest challenges in grounded theory research, especially when conducted PhD studies, that is a big study, like some majority of the studies would require at PhD 250 to 300 pages. Let's say you have six research questions. Okay, one, two, three, four, five, six, and you want your 250 pages of findings in one diagram. Here is the process. This is the way to put it. This is a kind of logic diagram or storyline where you show the bidirectionality of your research questions in relation to your topic and your findings. And, basically, this is kind of an license that an original as well as, thought provoking study has been conducted. So, creating good diagrams, categorizing them in a meaningful manner is a part of grounded theory. So to speak, we have a lot to discuss, but scarcity of the time dictates that we keep the session to the limit. And if I may have forgotten something, let me just sift through my notes so that So hopefully, I have covered most of the things. And if somebody is interested in further guidance regarding graduate theory as well as qualitative research or journal mentoring, I'm available on my email address. Though I'm a busy person, but I definitely respond to queries that are emailed to me, especially if they are, you know, they're to the point. So here is a chance. I thank everybody who joined us throughout the world from all parts of the global north and global south, as well as from my own countries, so as well as my students. So I thank you very much on behalf of Calvas as well as University of Swat for having the patience to listen me for such a prolonged period of time. And I hope that if there are any questions, I would be able to answer them. And I leave it to Dr. Haider Shah for the rest of the session. Please, Doctor.
Yeah. Thank you very much. Superb, Dr. Mohammad Tariq. Really wonderful session and really great illustration and explanation. I love the way you just explain it from the beginning, from the abstract till the coding staging. I mean, you did not leave anything. You tried to cover each and everything. And I love your passion regarding the grounding theory. And I like the way you just mentioned that what are the different misconception, and particularly sometimes reviewers, their comments regarding the grounded theory, and particularly the qualitative research, inductive research. I really appreciate that thing, and above everything, I loved your energy level with a smiling face. You explain each and everything. As I was discussing before we came to live, I just mentioned to you that the way you interact, the way you talk is so wonderful in such a pleasant way, that how great
Thank you.
teacher you would be in the class when you will be taking class of 2 to 3 hours, how much knowledge you will be sharing and how much knowledge your students will be gaining is amazing. Thank you very much for such a wonderful and great session. And I could see that the slides were that had very less content, but the way you were explaining were so nice, so wonderful, that I could see a lot of illustration was coming out of your side. And I was just watching the way you contain the knowledge was so great, so nice. And thank you once again for sharing wonderful insights on these important things. And as you can see on the comment section, we have plenty of questions because a lot of questions are there for you. But some of the question you have already addressed, but needs a little bit of your illustration. So if you allow me, should I start with the first question, please?
Yeah, please go ahead.
Yeah. Thank you very much. Let me just show on the screen the first question. They want to ask that how do you determine when you have collected enough data or reached saturation in grounded theory study? Yes,
Yeah,
please.
this is a very nice question. Yeah, you absolutely have no chance of stating at the inception of a project, thesis, undertaking, or manuscript writing that how many interviews that you will conduct. Now, the process of saturation is, it is a process that involves practice. Practice in a sense that, once you carry out one interview, then you transcribe it, try to transcribe it, and try to transcribe it verbatim within 24 hours so that you retain majority of the information. And once through the process of interviewing, let's say you have conducted 10 interviews, and then you do the you study the findings, or you discuss the findings in your research group, and every day you come up with something new. Like, you may have heard about recycling. Now, everybody talks about recycling and say recycling is very good and it is a way to combat anthropogenic global warming because it increases the longevity of various materials, and it is very important and, and environment friendly. And then you say that, okay, what is recycling, or what are the types of recycling? And then you say, oh my god, nobody knows that, what is recycling, what are the types of recycling. Let's say you've conducted an interview, and new information comes up. For example, you come to know that when a product is recycled and the new product created is of paritative value, that is what we call recycling. But if the recycled product is of higher value than the existing product which was recycled, we call it upcycling. And let's say the residual products which was recycled is of lower value than the original one, we say downcycling. Now, here is where you come to know that the point of theoretical saturation had not reached. And let's say from the outset you are not getting anything, any new thing, or people are repeating old things. So it means that the type of interviewees or the participants that you have selected are inadequate. And this is one of the best thing in grounded theory. This allows you the opportunity to change the sampling. As I have already earlier on stated that in open coding, the sampling is purposive, in the second selective, and then we have deliberate. So you change gears and you look at, mostly when repetitive responses, you start receiving repetitive responses, when new insights cease to emerge, you say that sufficient densification has been attained, and that is where you stop. Because we need to maintain a balance. Too few interviews are inadequate, but too many are hard to analyze. So it's a fine grained balance that you determine through the process, as well as through the constant involvement. I would suggest, talking about is difficult, doing doing it is easier. Once you do it, then you just do it, you will come to know how it is done. I hope I have answered the query.
Wow,
And if
wonderful. Wonderful. The way you just illustrated it, the way you have given example is so nice, so great. And I'm really enjoying the way you are giving the answer. It's so nice. And that brings me to the another question. Today, nowadays, we are talking about the artificial intelligence, the technology, the tools, etc. So, second question is related to the same thing. And they want to ask the question from you that what software tools are available for coding and analyzing qualitative data, and how do they support the grounded theory process? Yes, please.
Yeah, very nice question. This Atlas.ti, NVO, and several new version of softwares are available. Unfortunately, I did not mention them because in the global south, the countries that are living below the base of the pyramid, people, majority of the people earning more than $2-3 per, less than $2-3 per day, as well as in our universities and colleges in global south, we don't have access to such softwares. So this qualitative research and grounded theory can be carried out with and without a software. And after all, a software does not do the analysis, it rather does the categorization for you. So if available, it can be helpful in terms of the categorization, but the ultimate analysis is left to the human mind. And that is where AI is, I would say, unable. to carry out this complex process, because it is context dependent, and the context that we are doing our studies is largely informal, undocumented, and not available in uh, archival directories. So even ChatGPT and AI related softwares have difficulty in documenting some of the research findings. For example, research findings related to far-flung areas, research findings related to conflict areas, or research undertakings uh, where there is hard to conduct researches. So I would say ChatGPT is a good tool available. It expedites the process, but you first learn to do it manually. Once you do it manually, you can always do it with the help of software, provided that you have access. And I did not mention it on purpose because a majority of our people, if somebody in the audience has access to such softwares, I would suggest sharing with us, as well as so that we can share with other people who may not be entitled to such facilities. So I appreciate the question. Thank you.
Oh, very nice answer, and thank you very much. I really second your opinion on that. That AI cannot replace the human mind. Definitely, our mind is much superior and better than the any Chat GPT and anything. But as you mentioned, that is very important. First, we need to understand it and manually do it, and then we can take a benefit from the any tools to make it more fast and expedient. Thank you very much. And now another very interesting question, since you are the expert of the grounded theory, they want to ask you from your perspective of expertise that what are the some common challenges researchers face when using grounded theory and how can they be overcome? Yes, please.
Yeah, obviously, grounded theory is challenging, especially for understanding. One of the biggest challenges that not people understand grounded theory in totality. Even the pioneers of the grounded theories, they give lectures, but they never, in my opinion or in my knowledge, as far as I have googled them, they never exemplified or demonstrated it. So, in my seminal study of 2020, I was the person who was able to break it in a high impact factor journal. And now it is available to other scholars for using, for emulating. So, that was the biggest challenge. The biggest challenge is for the person who pioneers it. And then there is also a challenge of seeking permission. For example, if there is a particular process, and the process that let's say you want to use that process and cite it in your paper or study, for that you need to seek permission. And some of the time, there is an embargo period. Some of the time they will not give you permission to use that. So sometimes knowledge barriers do exist. Other challenges can be from reviewers, special reviewer too. There is a group by the name of Reviewer 2 must be Reviewer 2 must be stopped. Reviewer 2 is the kind of nonsensical reviewer who gives comments like in a qualitative study that you should use regression model or correlation model and use numbers. So this kind of nonsensical people, they also give you a tough time. Then in the grounded theory, you know the process of interviewing in itself is also very difficult. And in qualitative research in journal, in grounded theory in particular, the voluminous volume of data collected is another issue. In particular, I would say, if not planned properly, grounded theory can consume approximately 30% more time than ordinary thematic writing. So that is another challenge. With regards to journal challenges, there are so many other journal challenges, but I would say if you use a thematic study, that would be rather simpler and it would be more abridged. And if you use a grounded theory approach, it would be more systematic, develop more systematic insights and proposition, but it would be a bit time consuming, especially if you have not properly planned it. That's it.
Very, very nice, Dr. Muhammad Tariq. I really enjoying. the way you are answering, and I love the way you just quoted the reviewer two and their comment. Most of the time we get the different kind of WhatsApp image of reviewer two, since we are PhD doctors, so definitely we have gone through that process of defenses and a lot of publication, a lot of reviewers comment on the same way. So everything came to my mind of that particularly images. So since our time has reached to its limitation, now one last question. Since all you have already talked about very nicely the role of the concept, and you defined the concept in a very nice way. So one of the our viewer asked a very nice question from you. They want to ask that how do researchers distinguish between concepts, the categories, and properties when coding in grounded theory? Yes, please.
Yeah, again, very nice question. Um, with respect, it is there is sometimes the problem is that we describe things in one way and they're interpreted in another. For example, you must have heard about the word guidelines. Now, guideline does not mean that you just become stereotypical or you just beat one simple path. It means that you go in some kind of guidelines. You have certain level of discretion. Qualitative research is a science as well as an art, and it gives you a leeway to categorize and conceptualize. And I later on, I previously I discussed that concept is how you classify the world in your mind. So that is why in majority of the cases in qualitative researches as well as in grounded theory, we we don't use theoretical frameworks, although it is a requirement in our culture that we must give some theoretical justification in the palm of theoretical framework. But I would suggest you develop a conceptual framework. Now, a conceptual framework, it does what? It gives your conceptualization of mind regarding how you classify your research in a meaningful manner that contributes to the society. So, for inductive qualitative studies, a conceptual framework is a meaningful lens to see uh, I would say, study. With regards to concepts, I've already made it clear is how you classify the world in your mind. Now, concept and categories as well as properties now depends upon the context of the study. In ethnography, one word would mean something else. In another culture, in another culture, it would mean different. So ethnography is different, grounded theory is different. But I would say, concept uh, upon identifying the concept, you allocate it into certain categories. Once those categories mature, or once they densify to a certain level, you say that, a core or main category has been identified. With regards to properties, it is, I would say, more of a supporting, or I would say extraneous discussion that you discuss as it is listed in one of the open and Excel coding strategies. I would say, you know, qualitative research is meaning making. It is not into going into the diagram. The spirit should be followed, not the letter, because grounded theory is, you have the leeway, you have the, I don't call it liberty at the freedom, but you have the slight, what do we call it? You have this slight advantage in terms of uh, designing your study, and that is where you make context specific changes into your studies and categorize your concept, categories, and properties accordingly.
Wow, very nice. Dr. Mohammed Tariq, really I'm enjoying. And since our time, there is a time limitation, otherwise there are a lot of questions waiting in the queue further. And the way you are explaining is so nice and very insightful. And I really request our audience from around the globe that please do not hesitate to contact Dr. Mohammed Tariq for further illustration or for any research collaboration. He would be very helpful, and he's a great mentor in guiding you in your research work. Do not hesitate to contact with him. He's very generous and very helpful. So thank you very much once again, Dr. Mohammad Tariq, for your wonderful presentation and powerful content. And at the end of the session, Dr. Mohammad Tariq, we asked our guests regarding their message to the world. So, what is your message to the world as a speaker, author, teacher, researcher, trainer, learner, and educator? Yes, please.
Thank you very much for the opportunity. My message is simple. Try to make the world a better world by contributing your own share. And no matter how big or small, try improving on a daily basis. And if you develop on a daily basis, by the end of an year or a decade, you have made a lot of difference. And try to live with a purpose, try to leave a legacy for other people. That is what we call Sadqa Jariya in our Muslim faith. So the best among us is one who is most beneficial for other people. Try to have an abundance mentality and think of the world as as having abundant opportunities, and just don't think that my success or my promotion will be at the expense of another person. And try, be a good person, try be a good human being for yourself, family, friends, and all those. And this way you contribute to the God's world, to the people, and to the future generation. So, in simple, try to be nice to to the people around you, not only in your neighborhood, but in your province, country, in your continent, and obviously across the world. So, with this, I say goodbye to our audience, and for those people who participated, and for those who raised question. I have thoroughly enjoyed this session. Especially, I'm thankful to Dr. Haider Shah for having, giving me such encouraging feedback, as well as those who asked very thought-provoking, very nice and articulate questions. I'm thankful to all. Goodbye. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you very much, Dr. Muhammad Tariq. What a lovely message you have given to the world, and I believe the your words. And if you allow me to rephrase it, that if you are beneficial to the field, to the world, that is the best thing. Become a contributor, not only consuming but producing certain things, so that the people, and this globe can take advantage of your presence in this globe. So that's all from our side. And to the audience, please do follow our distinguished guest speaker through his research work, and you can email him for future learning and guidance. He is very generous and always ready to help the people. Moreover, wonderful explanation and powerful content which great speaker has already elaborated will help you to learn and develop your understanding regarding the grounded theory. So that's all we have time for today. And thank you once again, Dr. Mohammad Tariq, for your great presentation and high level of energy. And I would like to thank our audience who join us from around the globe. If you have any additional questions about information shared today, please email us or connect to the speaker directly through his email or social media account. We will be also providing his email address in the description of this video so that you can contact him easily. Thank you all for your support and liking our session. Stay tuned as many sessions are on the way. Please do not miss any session. Until next session, take care of yourself. Bye-bye.